Steven Kubacki. In 1978, Steven went missing for 15 months on Lake Michigan. He was cross-country skiing and he went missing, and they tried to find him, and brought in the guard. They brought in everybody. They couldn't find him. He had planned this with 3 other co-conspirators. They had a whole plan that he would go underground with a new pseudonym, and kind of take up this mission that these 4 people had. Lots of controversy here as to what happened then. He did engage in light beings, as he describes it. I had lots of questions about that. What was that experience like? How did they communicate, etc.? A lot of things happened during those 15 months that we discussed. He decides to come back and meet his parents and say he has amnesia, had amnesia for the last 15 months. And now 45 years later, he wrote a book called The Disappearance. Fascinating man, Steven is, and very highly intelligent, and great discussion. I was able to kind of reel him into some areas that I wanted to really focus on, but I appreciate Steven's time for the conversation, and I appreciate you watching and continuing to listen. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because of working way too much. Before you know it, I found myself 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. Took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People think there's some secret. Ask me, how'd you lose that weight? Like there's some secret. There is no secret. How did I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends, colleagues convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually asked them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Excited to talk to you, Steven Kubacki. Thanks for your time today. So, Steven, in 1978, you and some friends, colleagues, staged your disappearance for 15 months. Why?
Why? Well, we wanted to change the world. That's sort of the bottom line. We were pretty upset with the way the world was being run. The world was becoming more increasingly globalized, global corporations. Authoritarianism was on the rise, environmental destruction. There was a sense that things were just kind of on a course that could not be, that wasn't going to be changed. And, 45 years later, we're still on that course, and perhaps in a far worse way than it was way back when in 1978. So it was a conspiracy between me and a few others to get together to see if we could change the world. And we had a plan. Our plan was that I would disappear and go underground and start a kind of people's resistance movement, kind of in the traditional way. And then the other 3 people would develop their own, you might say, influences or power structures. One person would go into theology or Christianity and become a leader there. Another person would go into finance and business and become a billionaire. Another person would go into the political world and become, a major leader. And so we had these 2 sort of divisions we called the right arm and the left arm. I was the left arm. I was going underground to develop, to be trained in a kind of develop a paramilitary organization, be trained in martial arts. And the people above ground were going to do the traditional way of kind of gaining power and influence. And at some point, decades in the future, we would all come together. And the belief was then we would pool our resources and that we would be able to change the world the way we would want to change it. Our goal was to democratize things. We wanted everything to be democratized.
In this fast-paced MSP landscape, how do you stay ahead? Introducing MSPinfluencer.com, your ultimate hub for MSP news, insights, and community connection powered by Forza Dash. More than 75,000 MSPs subscribe to our MSP Influencer Pulse weekly newsletter, staying informed and ahead of industry trends. Tune in to emerging podcasts from Joey Pinz and leading MSP voices, offering essential tips, powerful insights, and success stories. Explore our multi-authored blogs, crafted specifically for MSP leaders, delivering fresh perspectives and actionable strategies. Celebrate excellence with the industry-leading Forza Dash MSP Influencer Awards, recognizing innovation, leadership, and impact in the MSP community. Join thousands of MSP professionals who trust MSPinfluencer.com to grow their business and expand their networks. MSPinfluencer.com, where today's MSP leaders connect, collaborate, and conquer, all powered by the Forza Dash platform, helping MSP vendors work effectively with MSPs and helping MSPs grow.
As much as possible.
How does your disappearance help this cause? Why not just do it as yourself? Why not change your identity? Why get the people of Michigan to look for you and trouble your parents and friends?
You're right.
Why do this? Why do the disappearance? Why not just change
We it was a ruthless act. I'm not going to deny it, and it created a lot of suffering for my parents and my friends. And and I still feel bad about that. I've come to terms with my family and loved ones, but we felt we were in a desperate situation. We didn't want to be co-opted in the sense that when people try to do good things, they eventually kind of get sucked into the system, and that was a fear of ours. And also, by my going underground, it would cement our organization in this sort of secrecy that I disappeared. And then underground, I would be able then to have a new identity and kind of accomplish my goals, which I was unable to accomplish.
How long had the four of you been conspiring to do this?
Oh, probably less than a year.
And how did you meet the three others?
The three others I've met, they were kind of people I knew in different capacities. The book is written so that the identities of all the conspirators are changed. I've changed, where they lived and all kinds of things to protect their identities.
And these are school chums?
Some were kind of from school, some are elsewhere.
So you get together and say, I don't like the way the system, it's 1978. It's a different climate then, of course. It's post-Vietnam. It's all these music is, the disco, punk, and rap. I mean, it's the United States is in a very, very different kind of frame at this point, right? And are you a drug taker?
No, I'm not. I have experimented on drugs, but I'm not a drug taker. I don't do drugs on any frequent basis.
So in the 70s, you weren't on any hallucinogens or anything?
I did some hallucinogens. I mean, everybody did some hallucinogens way back in the 70s.
Yeah. And would you classify yourself as a hippie back then?
No. I was definitely not. I was almost the opposite of a hippie. Actually, when I was at, going to go back a little bit in time, when I was at Deerfield Academy, which is a private prep school I was in, when people were into having long hair, I got a crew cut. I was always a very rebellious child, so I was kind of always rebelling against sort of the status quo, you might say, and that would be reflected in even my appearance. I mean, when I was in college, I had kind of longer hair, like most people, but so I was never into the hippie world
at all.
We spent a lot of time reading and studying, the great revolutionaries, Thomas Paine and, and various others.
And you didn't serve in the military. You didn't go to Vietnam.
No, I didn't serve in the military. I was just, I kind of missed that. I was just right on the cusp. I did have a draft. I was kind of low in the draft, so I probably would have been called up if it had continued. But yeah, the Vietnam War was coming to an end or had come to an end. There was just a lot of
Nixon,
social
Kennedy,
turmoil.
Martin Luther King, civil rights. I mean, it's a very tumultuous time in our history.
Yeah, there was a lot going on.
Your three others in your group here, did they serve? How did you know you had similar ideology? And you said you only met them a year before. I mean, it's kind of 1 year, Steven, where you
I knew some of them beforehand, but the actual kind of coming together and deciding to do this took a little while to figure out.
And you described the day where you walk out on Lake Michigan and the disappearance happened. You mentioned, I heard you say there was a bifurcation.
Yes.
Explain.
Well, what happened was the plan was I was going to go out to Lake Michigan and plant my skis, go out as far as I could. I used to go out there a lot. I did a lot of cross country skiing. I've always been an adventurer. I still am. I'm a mountaineer. I climb mountains. You know, and you've talked about your show about being about discipline. So discipline is a pretty kind of central focus in my life. And so I went way out as far as I could. Without falling through, and planted my skis in my backpack. And then at the same time, I had this like a revelation. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt as if I was in two places at the same time. There was me walking off the ice, and I became Nathan T. Stanfield. That was my new name. And then there was a part of me that I kind of entered some other sort of dimension, some sort of multiverse experience where I met sort of beings of light and kind of like an energy shell. I was not picked up by UFOs. Okay, this was not some UFO abduction thing, but I was in communication with these beings, and the communication was, you know, it's sort of beyond our kind of comprehension still now, but it was kind of through light and colors, and you might say there was some kind of like, I don't know, downloading of information in me that I didn't make sense of. And, you know, I've been in connection with these beings since then in different ways.
Okay. Please. Oh my goodness, Steven, this is so exciting. So when you were walking out on the lake, it was intentional. This is where you were going to stage your disappearance. That was premeditated, correct?
Yes.
And then as you walk out and you get to a certain point, you feel this transformation occurring, completely unplanned, unassisted, right? No drugs or alcohol?
No drugs. And I could feel it as I was cross-country skiing. I was in a very altered state of consciousness. I've been pretty hyped up. I'm about to do something like nobody's ever done before. Disappear. I mean, people have disappeared, but nobody has ever tried to disappear with a political and economic purpose behind it. Okay, that's what's very different about my disappearance. It just wasn't somebody saying, "Well, you know, hell with life. I want to start a new life." No, this was way beyond. That was about me starting a new life. It was about me dedicating myself to a cause, and my life has always been dedicated to causes and to service. I mean, after I reemerged, that was quite a I was depressed after I reemerged. I didn't know what to do with myself. It was difficult, but eventually I then went into become a psychologist, linguist first and a psychologist. And one of the things I learned was that what we accomplished wasn't going to work because it was in secrecy. And in some ways, even though it was supposed to be very anti-authoritarian, there was a kind of authoritarianism about it. And I also we lacked the psychological maturity, so I became a psychologist to understand what goes on emotionally at the micro level, at relationship level, not just at kind of understanding political systems and economic systems, what works and doesn't work with those. And since then, I've been now, let's say the last 7 or 8 years, I've been trying to combine the two, kind of look at the different ways. In order to make change, you have to not only work at a larger systems level, but also at kind of a micro level, many different levels to bring about change. And my books I've been working on are kind of devoted to that.
So you're 24 years old in 1978, right?
Yep. 23.
And you're born in 54, right? So your head's on fire. You're cross country skiing, Lake Michigan. You're going to plan this complete disappearance, and you get out there and beings get in touch with you. Please describe what that was like.
Yeah, I have it written. It's very hard to describe. I write it in a way that's, it's kind of dreamlike. It's kind of poetic and dreamlike because it's hard to sort of like most of these things to talk about them because they have a certain affability to them. But it felt as if I was being taken care of, that I was being guided, and that, that I had a purpose here on this planet,
Hmm.
and we all have purposes here on this planet. And part of my purpose was to undergo this experience, and from it, then maybe do some other. The goal was that I was going to disappear forever, and then at some point reemerge as Nathan T. Stanfield, and together, have kind of a revolutionary groovement, and combined with these other people who were above ground, and that's what would be different about us. We this is what make our kind of attempt at changing the world very radically different from what anything else had done. But the beings, uh, let's
Describe
see.
them.
Yeah, well, it's like beings of light. They would change colors, light to kind of different forms,
Oval
kind of
shapes.
in an energy shell.
I say.
There was a sense of connecting with other universes. We might call them wormholes. Uh,
How did they communicate to you?
they communicate through light, and it's hard to translate into words, but there was a sense of my being, things being reorganized a little bit inside me. And later I would read, in classic shamanism, it's not untypical for whatever you call these beings of from other universes or dimensions. I mean, the multiverse now is the paradigm in physics, and I think that's what's really nice about the multiverse paradigm is it gives a place for these beings and dimensions to exist. It's not just in our imaginations.
Had you
And
had these visitors before? Had you seen these light beings before?
no, I hadn't. I did have encounters with what I call the dark presence,
Hmm.
a sort of sense of a darkness kind of following me when I was young. There was one time I was a young teenager, kind of nightmarish where they kind of try to take you over. And I decided I would face them and put them in a box. And this is sort of a kind of a shamanic ritual, put them in some kind of container. So I went to sleep and I thought about them. And then I had this lucid dream of where I met these sort of dark forces,
Hmm.
and I put them inside this box. But then at some point I knew I couldn't control it. They knew I couldn't control it, and they were going to start to break out and take me over. And I had to wake myself up. And even in I was awake, I could feel them, in my bedroom, and I had to like crawl and open the door to get out. That was one of those experiences.
So it seems like the
Uh,
complete opposite of what you found on the lake.
Sort of the complete opposite. Yeah, during my disappearance, I did meet a being I called the Dark Monk, and the Dark Monk is, you might say, a being, a dark being whose goal is the end justifies the means.
Hmm.
That whatever you need to do to accomplish something good, however you did it doesn't matter.
A
Uh,
vigilante.
yeah, well, but more than a vigilante, it's kind of like a dark. We can look at, there are many different ways of looking at existence. In some ways, I think if we look at say a transcendental world, at these other multiverse, other universes, and dimensions, I think some of them are affecting us. Some of them do have a presence, and they may be what guides what happens in our world to some degree. Especially a lot of what we think of as evil things, as things that are dark. So part of my story is kind of a struggle between. I mean, it sounds kind of old fashioned, but kind of between good and evil.
Hmm.
In the end, I redeemed myself. I was able to not do what I was supposed to do, which is why that I reemerged. I
Hmm.
I couldn't carry out my mission. I
How
even
long?
yeah. Sorry.
So this interaction on Lake Michigan, how long do you think it lasted between when they first contacted you and when they didn't? How long was that interaction?
It's you get into temporal dilations. It's
Uh,
hard to know how long it could have. It felt to me like days and days, but I'm sure it was
it did.
probably a minute. Who knows how long? It's hard to tell. Um,
And their overall message, were they trying to talk you out of being
no, no,
disappeared, you
no. The
think?
message was to continue with what I was doing,
Ah.
and to have faith. To have faith that we're all here to try to make the world a better place, and to make that as part of my service. And they didn't. I didn't get any messages like, "Oh, this is what's going to happen, and you're going to be successful," or this or that. but it was kind of a sense of realizing that there are beings or entities out there that do care about us and want us, want the human race to evolve, want us to progress, want us to become members of the multiverse, and not be so so crazily, hyper focused on our own, silly stuff that we're involved in most of the time.
You said you mentioned the Dark Monk. Was that later, or was that the first
That
time?
was later. That was later.
Did you give any names to any of the beings there when you first met them the first time?
No, they didn't. No, I didn't have any names for any of them. No, there's no naming or.
And you mentioned that it definitely wasn't a UFO or definitely wasn't a flying saucer. Why rule that out?
Well, that's a very good question. I think one of the problems that happens with people who have experiences with other beings, other dimensions, or maybe even in this world is is it happening in this world or is it not happening in this world? Again, if you look at a lot of history of people who have had experience with other, it could be in medieval times, angels. It just depends what time you're at. That were they actually abducted or were they kind of involved in another dimension? And I'm not saying there aren't aliens possibly coming to this planet and abducting people, but I think a lot of spiritual people call spiritual experiences involve entering these other dimensions and not really, and it feels like you're being abducted. We live in a society that's tremendously ignorant about the spiritual world. What we know about it is Star Wars, the Force, and other things like that. And people don't have experiences work being in the spiritual or the transcendental world, and so it can be pretty scary if something comes upon you and you don't know what it is. You can get pretty paranoid, and then you can project your own paranoia on what you're seeing. So rather than might be good, you turn it into something like some nasty reptile trying to do something to you or insert things in you. Again, if you look at the history and a lot of spiritual, including Christianity, there's oftentimes these beings that put things in people. Okay, and these things are supposed to be, helpful or good to you. Whereas being sort of like, somebody planting, something in your teeth and controlling you kind of in a kind of a psychotic way.
So when you met them on the lake and you're interacting with these beings, were they all on the lake or did you go somewhere else?
I was somewhere else, but again, we're talking about a dimension. It could be like like cutting space and opening it up, and you're
Right.
somewhere else.
But you were no longer on the
Doesn't
lake.
mean I traveled zillions
Right.
of miles,
Right.
but in quantum mechanics, I mean, the wormholes, you can move from one place to another place
In an
instantaneously or
instant.
pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Did you still have your skis on?
No. I
And
didn't feel.
did you have the
I
same
felt.
clothes?
I even felt like I was a being of light,
Whoa.
as that I was sort of a being of light too, and changing. Um, I remember also seeing there was I had another vision then of kind of a man in a kind of like looking like me, like in a goatee, kind of a funny looking guy. And he was like pulling levers, and somehow these had something to do with changing people's destinies or kind of what would happen or not. And
Oh, so there were humanoids there. I thought you said they were just beings of
there's these
light.
beings, no, but then I had this vision of that.
Oh, you had a
That
vision.
wasn't part of that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I
sorry
see.
to confuse things. Yeah.
And when you're communicating with these beings, there's nothing verbal. You just knew what they were saying, and it was non-verbal communication.
It was
Correct?
nonverbal, but to say I knew what they were saying is also probably say more than what I actually could understand.
Mm.
It
But you
was
understood their intention
the
because
intention was clear.
yeah,
It felt safe. It felt positive. And what's really wonderful is connecting with something that's that's outside of our world.
right,
And this sense of connecting is, I think, helps ground people. If you look at the psychology of people who feel connected to the transcendental, however you define that, these people usually are more stable. They're usually happier. They live longer. I think in some way, and again, a lot of the psychology studies show the more connected we are with the world, not just this world, but in general, the
Mm,
entire multiverse, the happier we are, the more meaningful life can be. The opposite is disconnection. As we
mm,
disconnect more and more, we move into the negative emotions. Negative emotions are all about disconnection, getting angry, fearful. It's all reducing your world, whereas the positive emotions expand your world. So if you look at the multiverse, one of the characteristics of the multiverse is that it has this infinite diversity, the infinite acceptance. And if we think of a human emotion that might correlate with that, we might call it love,
mm.
curiosity, positive emotions versus negative emotions.
And during this
Yeah.
communication time,
Mhm.
Stephen, did you ever felt threatened, or was it pure euphoric? Euphoric. I mean, describe
Uh,
your emotions.
in this particular encounter, I would say was kind of more euphoric and positive. Never felt threatened. Later on, when I let when I now I'm Nathan T. Stanfield, and I'm going to Monterey. That's where I went next, and there I got involved with a kind of a dojo to start learning martial arts. And those people there later I found out were brujos and had their own kind of, like you might say, dark magic going on. And I had these dreams or these feelings that they were trying to draw energy from me,
Hmm.
from they're in the in quantum mechanics and multiverse. There's like an infinite number of U's, an infinite number of worlds and places, and I felt they were trying to draw energy from me from my other places. And this is where, so I felt menaced in that way. And I had I don't know, it's an experience of meeting Jaguar, where this energy or spirit Jaguar came and told me I should leave the Brujo, but also I had this sort of sense of becoming the Jaguar too. It was a very, very intense experience. I guess if you read the literature, kind of classic of finding what we might call a power animal,
Yeah.
and that was very, very important, leading me to my next step from Mexico.
So the overall message there back on Lake Michigan from these beings of light was that of positivity and keep doing what you're doing.
Positivity, and to just to be open, to be authentic, to really reveal. And I think when people do that, they develop a real sense of connecting with others, and I think that's what makes things work. When we look at, I've been writing a lot more on economics lately, and if you look at, how does a corporation work? It's through trust. It's social connectedness. It's not through meism. It's not through this hyper extreme individualism mythology that people are brainwashed into. It's people caring about one another. I mean, I have clients who work in Amazon and Microsoft. They put 90 hours of work in. Why do they do that for? Yeah, some of it for the money, but they do it because they care about people. They're social creatures. There's a sense of connecting. And the more, and unfortunately, there is a small group of people, you might say the 4 or 5% of the population, who are sociopathic, who don't have empathy, don't have compassion, and misuse the people, the 95%, who are very social.
And did when you were with these
Sorry, I didn't mean
beings
to
of
go
light,
off on that tangent, but
did they make it clear that you can contact us ever? You can contact us again. How did you depart with them?
how did it? There was no. It was just, I don't know, just stop. Yeah, if I want to contact them, I can contact them.
Oh, they gave you a means in which to contact them.
No, you can. Anybody can. There was lots of spiritual methodologies where you can move into other dimensions and universes. Meditation's one of them. Using drugs is one of them. Uh, some kinds of very intense dancing, fasting, prayer. There are different ways of entering these other universes or dimensions. The problem is because these are so kind of incomprehensible, we have a tendency to project our own personal histories, our own personal biases into these worlds. So if I'm a Christian, I probably would see Jesus or angels. If I'm a Buddhist, I might see Buddhas everywhere. If I'm from a more tribal society, I might see more power animals and plant spirits and other things like that. So this is the difficulty in dealing with this world, is that people have a tendency to literalize what they experience, that it's the truth what I'm experiencing. No, it's your interpretation of what you're experiencing. Of course, we know in religions have caused a lot of harm and a lot of wars because I think because of this literalization.
But you didn't use any of these methods to invoke these beings. They just came to you there on Lake Michigan.
They just came to me. I mean, I have done some hallucinogens where I've had other, similar experiences, but you don't need hallucinogens. It's a training where you can train your mind to kind of let go. In modern physics, it's called entering a state of quantum consciousness. A lot of very famous physicists believe that there's an intentionality to all things, a quantum consciousness. And then when we enter the state of consciousness, like sometimes in dreams, we have access to these infinite possibilities in the multiverse. But what we access is very dependent on what we know. Our knowledge constrains what we can experience and make sense of.
So you believe these beings are who?
Are who?
The ones you met in Lake Michigan are who and what? What are they?
I don't know who they are. I don't have a place for them. I think they're, in other experiences I've had with these beings are more interdimensional beings.
And pure benevolence, pure
yeah, these
melancholy.
are pure. Now there are forces and beings out there that are not nice.
But let's just talk about the ones you witnessed on Lake Michigan.
Yeah, I know, but those, the ones that was all positive. But there are, it's a very complex existence we live in, and there are forces out there that are not, we might call malevolent,
right?
Or I would say they're indifferent. Like sometimes, people work with energies from a mountain or something like that, and they think then that the mountain cares about them. No, the mountain doesn't care about you. It's like the sun. The sun shines on you. It warms you up. Do you think the sun is interested in you? No, not really. But you access its energy. And this is one of the problems in a lot of spirituality, is a lot of people think anthropomorphize what's going on. There's lots of these things going on that have really no interest in you, or may have a negative interest in you.
What if discipline wasn't about punishment, but about unlocking your best self? I spent 2.5 years writing Discipline for Greatness because discipline changed my life. And I know it can change yours too. This isn't theory. Inside, you'll find real, practical steps you can use immediately to focus better, build stronger habits, reduce stress, accomplish your goals, and bring more balance to your life. Whether you're trying to get healthier, improve your career, or simply feel more control, this book gives you the framework. Start today. Grab your copy of Discipline for Greatness at joeypinz.com/book. Thank you. And did you meet these exact beings again later in life?
Yeah, I have. I have met them later in life, yeah.
And their message was?
A similar message. Just about staying on course, giving me confidence to write my books, to try to be of a service as much as I can to others. There's also a very adventuresome quality when you're kind of moving through kind of different universes. It's hard to describe.
It's interesting to me that that they would still push you forward on this mission. I mean, you're a young 20-year-old, you want to you want to change the world forever. You've got, I'm going to say good intentions, but they just wanted to move with that narrative. They weren't trying to talk you out of it all. They were just trying to confirm it. And so it made it, without them, would you have done it as well?
Yeah. Yeah, this was purely accidental. It was not planned in any means. I mean, before that, I've had some experiences with, I don't know, you might call them spiritual. I call them multiverse experiences. That's how I like to talk
Right.
about it now.
Yeah, big believer
I
in
think
multiverse. Yeah.
I like to modernize what's going on, and I
Mm.
think again the ancient religions, old religions have a lot to offer us, but they also have a tremendous amount of baggage. And I think looking at it in this terms of the multiverse is actually a better way. It doesn't get so anthropomorphic and my God against your God and that kind of nonsense.
Okay, so now you become Nathan T. Stanfield. You come off
Right?
this experience with these beings. You leave the skis in the ice, and you hitchhike to Mexico.
Yeah, yeah. It was kind of a funny thing because I was supposed to have a getaway car, and I get to the getaway car, and guess what? It doesn't work. It's frozen. And I'm there. What the fuck? Like, can't these people do anything right? I'm working with, and so then I walk into town. I walk into town, and I get myself a bus ticket to Monterrey, Mexico, and I'm not. Nobody notices me. Nope, it's not. Was not noticed at
And you
all.
used do they need an ID back then? How
No,
did you
no, no. You don't need IDs. You see, back then, in the late '70s, there was no internet.
Right.
There's no tracking. What I did would
No
be
cameras, yeah.
incredibly difficult to do now, unless you
Yeah.
actually had fake IDs and all kinds of weird stuff going on. You could go around anywhere. I remember once going through an airport and my name coming up, and I actually said, this person, disappeared, and the guy didn't even care. I was like, whatever, go through. See.
Because then there's a whole discussion how you had a marathon shirt on, and they looked for your name in
No,
the
I did. I did
registry.
run. I did run in a marathon. One a part of
Yeah.
my training when in a particular place I was at was I did run a marathon. That was part of the training was to run a marathon. Um, yeah, that was. Yeah, I was with one of the co-conspirators. We trained together, and yeah, I think I had never done much running before, but it sounds a little absurd. But like in 6 weeks, I ran a marathon, and
Yeah.
I did it under 4 hours.
Well, it should be noted too. You're a highly intelligent person. I don't know what your IQ is, but you were able to take these tests and miss classes, and you were granted a PhD in Germany, or free tuition, I should say. And that should be noted. Have you ever worked with the government, Stephen?
No, I never worked with the government. My family thought that somehow I had to be involved in the
Yes.
CIA because
Yes.
how could I travel and do all the things I did even after my disappearance? And to be honest with you, I didn't argue. I didn't say no to that.
Because if you had been working with the government, you couldn't say you were.
No,
So
I know, right? No, no, I have not. I have never worked with the CIA, the FBI, Homeland Security, etc. I've never worked with any of them. Um,
how
yeah,
about another governmental agency?
no, none, zero.
And so you go to Mexico as this new pseudonym, and with the goal. Well, the reason why, by the way, I mentioned the government, because you used the word paramilitary organization. So I mean, these days that'd be a red flag if that was discovered with the government, and you'd have a talking to, etc. But you're
Sure.
saying that never happened.
That never happened. No, I was never involved with I was training, but I was never involved with a paramilitary organization. Except I did near the end before I reemerged. I did. Uh, uh, I would call it enlist. I checked out the French Foreign Legion.
Mm.
I was in the French Foreign Legion for a very short period of time. I did not enlist. I did not sign any papers or anything, and it was that experience that ended that ended my interest in carrying out my mission because I witnessed it was during a mess hall in the evening. They found some deserter was brought in and they beat the shit out of him. I mean,
Hmm.
they practically killed this person and they wanted us to join in and kick. And, I didn't have anything to do with it. And then I had this spontaneous vision of what would it be like if I, went through and joined the French Foreign Legion. And, I saw myself, killing innocent people and in jungles and doing this and then eventually, developing this organization. You can find this weird, but there was this vision of people older people who had terminal illnesses, strapping dynamite to their bodies, blowing up, corporations, boards, and there's this whole kind of world organization based on kind of this figure of a monk, which I was head of, and then in the future, I joined with the other co-conspirators who were pretty important people in the world, and then we kind of made our move. And yeah, it was sort of successful, but the carnage, the violence, and in a sense, the vision showed I would become the exact opposite of what I wanted to be.
Right.
And I think this happens a lot to people. I think people think that they're going to do good in the world. Like, I can't tell you, I'm sure you have. I met people who have great ideas about, I'm not going to be like the other executives, when I climb the ladder, I'm going to be different. And I swear to God, I have rarely met anybody who's climbed the ladder who in the end who hasn't become a total sociopath.
Yeah. Same
Money and power corrupts, and there's very few people can resist that. I'm not saying there aren't some, but very few.
So after 15 months, you decide this is enough. I'm going to go. You go back to Massachusetts. You don't want to see your parents right away. So you go to see your aunt. You kind of explain things. What do you explain to your aunt after 15 months missing?
I don't explain anything. Well, before that, I was in San Francisco. I was involved in an organization called the Kalai Shugendo, and it was my last little attempt to maybe continue things, except it was kind of a cult thing, and it was all this seduction with these women, and eventually I decided I needed to get out of there, and then it was just very clear that it was the end. And so then I got to Massachusetts and feigned amnesia. That's what I did.
So you told everybody that you had amnesia and you don't remember what happened.
That's what I had to do. I did this, there were two reasons. I did it to protect myself, but more importantly, I did it to protect my co-conspirators, because if I didn't protect them, their lives would have been changed inalterably, like my own. It did take me a while to change my life and put it in a kind of, you might say, a more traditional direction. Even when I was in graduate school in psychology, I was being a TA in an introductory psychology class. My name came up in the book.
Yeah.
And my student said, "Are you Steven Kubacki?" And I'm there, "What? Are you kidding me? How could I be that person? I'm a PhD student, et cetera. So how could I be that kind of a person who had amnesia, right?" And, and it never went anywhere. Actually, I had to call the publishers to get my name extracted.
So for those 15 months, Stephen, how often are you in touch with your three other?
In the beginning, not at all. After I left Japan and returned to Hawaii and then back to the States, there was we all got together to kind of figure out what the next step was, because what I had tried to do before wasn't working. And so then we did have a meeting, all of us, in Holland, Michigan, the scene of the crime. And then
nobody recognized you.
Pardon?
Nobody recognized
you. It was a winter day, just get in, nobody knows you. And, and everybody was still extremely committed, probably in some ways far more committed than I was. I had lots of doubts. The book talks, there's times of revelry and, and excitement. There's times of incredible self-criticism and self-doubt. I make fun of, myself and others. And, I probably wasn't made to do this sort of thing. At some deeper level, I probably could never have carried this out, even though I felt I had to. I felt I really had to throw the dice and do something different. We all did. We all felt that. And I think younger people need to be able to start throwing the dice. I mean, we get easily distracted with sports and the media, entertainment, etc. And if people would get more involved in, we'll say, the real world, and start taking some risks, then maybe we might have a little different world.
Did your co-conspirators have visits from these light beings or?
No, not
they didn't.
They've had some of, I think, of their own experiences, but nothing like mine.
So you get back and you say you've got amnesia. What's the first thing your parents say when they see you?
Oh, they're ecstatic to see me. They're just, loving and glad you're back.
You're
And
24 years old now, right?
yeah, I'm 24 and everyone's happy to see me. And, there's a whole big media scene with TVs and cameras. And I even got book offers and movie offers. I declined them all because I didn't want to be defined by that event and nor anyone else. And so then I began to, redo my life. You might find
Right.
this funny, but one of my first jobs was working in a financial center in downtown Boston with a three-piece suit, the
Hmm.
exact opposite. And well, what a funny thing about that, I was at a Christmas party and I was dancing a little too crazy because, that's me. I'm just pretty wild. And my manager took me aside and said, cool it down, Steve. You can't do that. And then 2 weeks later, I met with her and she says, Steve, we really like you. You're real smart, but you're never going anywhere. Everybody knows who you are. Everybody can see through,
Mm.
your attempt to, not be what you are. And I thanked her and then I quit 2 weeks later. I went back to school and got into studying German. That went into, I got into a graduate degree program in German that led to linguistics, and linguistics led to, I was in Saudi Arabia for a year, and then that led then to a PhD in psychology.
So for 45 years, you stuck with the Amnesia story.
Yes.
And nobody that knew Nathan T. Stanfield ever came out and said, "Hey, wait a second, you're not that. You're Steven."
No one ever came out, no, that I'm aware of. Um, yeah. I mean, there are people I talked about the story, people, who were close to me and family and things like that. But no, I decided to bring it out now because I felt there's a lot going on in the world and my story might be, I don't know, might be informative to people, might be inspirational, might be, hey, I'm not saying people should go out and disappear. But that younger people are having a hard time now. They get easily distracted. There's all the drug industry. There's and that I was hoping that people could think, no, we can do something too. We can try to change the world. And radicalization. We usually think of that in a negative way, but when you think of somebody like Martin Luther King, he was radicalized. Thomas Paine, American Revolution, radical. I mean, radicalization is not necessarily a bad thing. It can lead to good things. Now, sometimes it leads to bad things. There's no doubt about that.
So you decide to write the Disappearance, your book.
Yeah.
Uh, why? Why not just go die with this?
It felt like it was an important story to my life, and I had to talk about it. And also, it was a way to, it's kind of like an origin story for me.
Huh.
And from this origin story, a lot of my other ideas kind of come from the ideas around the multiverse. I'm writing a book now called The Multiverse Guide to Humanity. Another book around the Sane Society, kind of based on Habermas's stuff. And I'm also writing a book on planetary economics. It's an entirely new vision of economics. Economics? People don't realize this, but modern economics is based on the belief that rationality is pure self-interest. Everything in psychology, anthropology, sociology says the opposite. We are essentially social creatures first.
Steven,
Can
so
you just think about that? Just think, we have an entire economic system that's based on lies, on a total lie
speaking
that
about
we
lying,
are.
so you lied about having amnesia for
Yeah,
45 years.
yeah, I did.
So why would somebody believe you now? Why not just think this is a lie what you're saying now with the book?
Whoa, was what I wrote about my disappearance?
Yes.
I've got because I there's nothing for me to lose. I just I'm going to tell the truth. That's what my one of the problems with the disappearance was lack of transparency, and I've tried to make my life now about radical transparency and openness. And my idea is that we all need to connect and be open about who we are. We're all flawed human beings. We're all
Hmm.
very flawed.
Yes.
And being open about our flawedness helps us to be more compassionate and caring with one another. I think sometimes idealizations get in the way. We get into these idealizations and perfectionisms, and then we become less human in a way. We don't show our incompleteness. Actually, one of my books is based on Gödel's theorems of incompleteness and inconsistency. theorem. Gödel was a famous mathematician at the time of Einstein, and he proved that everything is incomplete and inconsistent. All ideas, everything in the existence. And what I did and a mathematician did is we took his ideas and we kind of expanded them infinitely. And what we came up with was that in order for anything to exist, everything imaginable and unimaginable must exist, which is a mathematical proof for the multiverse. But we also countered that with in order for anything to exist, it must have boundaries. You have to have limitations. That's why we don't have, witches flying in the air and pigs flying. There are certain rules. Now, the rules are bendable, they're probabilistic, but we have rules. So there's this constant kind of dialectic or dialogue between the infinite and the finite that's going on all the time.
Do you believe in aliens, in life out there?
Of course. I'm sure there's extraterrestrials, and I'm sure there are good extraterrestrials, and I'm sure there's not so good extraterrestrials. Okay, just
you
like,
said that you were able to. So, when's the last time you were in contact with those beings, those light beings you had on Lake Michigan? When's the last time?
I was at Arches National Park.
Oh, beautiful.
Beautiful place. One of my favorite. I've been there about 7 or 8 times. Gorgeous. It's a very magical area.
Yeah, you saw them there?
Yeah, no. Well,
how long ago?
I'll be honest with you. I was doing some drugs, and I was able. I saw them, and there was this sense of very interesting. It's kind of moving across universes.
Did they remember you? Was there familiarity?
Yeah.
Did they remember you?
Yeah.
It's the same beings.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say. It's hard. It felt like that. Yeah. It felt like that. Yeah.
How many of these beings have you communicated with, do you feel, in your life? More than 10?
One of the things I've developed a technique I call constructive dissociation. So it's a lot, based on a lot of older traditions. But what I've learned to do is, like when I'm hiking, I do a lot of hiking and mountaineering, as I'm hiking, I can be somewhere else at the same time. So sometimes I can be connected with other things at the same time. I might work with plant energies or plant spirits or other, other beings in other places, or see myself in some other place, which is kind of interesting. So
fascinating, man, Steven. Fascinating. Is there something about 10 years ago? Okay, you're in your 70s now, right? You're
71. Just 71.
You look fantastic, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Congratulations. I'm glad you're keeping yourself in shape. 10 years ago, is there something you really firmly believed in that you don't believe in now?
It's a good question. Something I don't believe in.
About 10 years ago, in your 60s, early 60s.
I would say probably there was a time when I really believed in the Democratic Party. I know this is getting into politics. But what I found is the Democratic Party is not really, it's more of a technocratic party. I don't know if it really has the people's interests at heart anymore. I don't know. I mean, there are attempts in, something called democratic socialism, which I don't know if I'm crazy about, but I find that a little closer to what the heart of the Democrats used to be. I think the Democrats, actually Bernie Sanders talks a lot about that, about how Democrats sold themselves to the money interest, different kind of money interest than your typical oil industries or chemical. But I think, we need a party that really is there for people. I mean, I work with people at Amazon a lot alike. And I talked to some of them, and they're, I said, well, why don't you all get together and start your own Amazon? You don't need any of these people. You don't need to be giving Jeff Bezos $1 zillion so he can build another yacht. I mean, why don't you do it yourself? And I think that's changed a lot. I really think the problem is our culture is so hyper focused on this mythology of extreme individualism that we can't trust one another. If you can't trust each other, you can't rely on each other, then you can get picked off. Then you can get manipulated. That's why we don't have unions. There's problems with unions. I'm not going to argue with that, but at least unions, people were together. I remember my father was in unions. He struck one time for a whole year. Why did he do that? He did it for the greater good, to help others. It's, when we look at extreme individualism, it really emphasizes this sense of me, distrust, paranoia, manipulation. it's a very bad ideology, and it's only becoming more and more ingrained in this society, and that's why we're becoming more divisive. And you know the whole thing. I mean, I need to tell
Yeah,
you.
sure do. So, Stephen, I'm a little bit younger than you. I started my business back in the 90s. So I'm from New Haven, just
Oh, okay.
south of Deerfield, Massachusetts.
Yeah,
And
not far.
I was working way too hard and not paying attention to myself, and putting workouts and exercise in the back. Next thing I know, I'm in front of the doctor. She tells me I'm at 340 pounds. So I had gained all this terrible amount of weight. Yeah.
Wow, you
Yeah.
look great.
It doesn't look like you ever had a big period of all the pictures I've seen. You pretty much maintain your weight. Congratulations on that. And
Well,
so she says to me, if you don't lose this weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. My daughter
yeah.
was just born. Scared the
Yeah.
life out of
Wow.
me.
Wow.
Spent the next 6-7 months, lost about 130 pounds,
Wow.
kept it
Nice.
off.
Good
These
for
are
you.
lifelong changes. People say, well, what's your secret? What you do? And I always say, well, you mentioned it before, Stephen. I just say discipline. That's how focus, routine,
Right.
motivation. How does discipline play a role in your life, Stephen
Well,
Kubacki?
discipline is you have to believe in something strongly and be willing to put the time and energy. And good
Mm.
athletes suffer. You have to learn how to deal with pain and with setbacks. And also, you can't replace something with nothing.
Hmm.
When people are trying to lose weight, you have to replace whatever the weight means with something else. It might be mountaineering. It might be, it could be a variety of things, but you have to replace it with something. And this is why it's very hard for people to get out of different addictions, whether it's a food addiction, drug addiction, TV addiction, smartphone addiction, whatever it is. You have to replace, you can't replace something with nothing. And that's what people have a difficulty, is finding that
Very
purpose,
interesting.
finding what really motivates them and what excites them. And if they can find that, you can replace anything.
Hmm. Stephen, your approach to problem solving and just your view on life, just by knowing you just a little bit, I'm just going to ask the science versus art question. I would say it's a bit more science than art in your life, correct?
Yeah, I was trained as a scientist. I'm kind
Right.
of a little bit kind of a mathematical scientist, but I have a great appreciation for art. I do my own artwork. I do with pastels.
Hmm.
I write a lot of poetry.
You play
Actually, if you're
guitar.
interested, I just got married in August, and I wrote
Congratulations.
a poem. It's called an alphabet poem from A to Z, and every poem begins there's like a poem with the letter A, and every noun, verb, and adjective and adverb has to have the letter A.
Ah,
And then I go to B, C, D, all the way to Z, and that was my vows for my wife. And she was like
amazing.
totally blown away
So even
because
your
it's
art has a scientific edge to
yeah,
it.
well, you got to
It's
have a
fascinating.
structure.
You got to have structure.
It's
Yeah.
hard to do things without structure. If you look like Shakespeare's stuff, he had iambic pentameter. You create structures, and within
Right.
structures, then there's an infinite space within that structure. But structurelessness is very difficult to work
That's
with.
chaos. That's
That's right.
chaos.
It's chaos. You're right.
So do you meditate or journal?
I do some meditating. I kind of do this thing I told Constructive Association, where I'm kind of
Yeah.
walking and I'm kind of elsewhere and convening with other things. And I love being out in nature. Nature is very important. The
Yeah.
reason why nature is so important is because it takes us outside ourselves. While you're walking, as you're walking, your perceptions are changing, and as your perceptions change, you're letting go of yourself. This is why it's meditative when you walk, because you can't
Mm.
be just constantly thinking about yourself, because as you move, you're letting go, letting go, letting go, which is the basis of meditation, is letting go
Hmm. Is there a
of self.
question you wish more people would ask you?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think the question I like people to ask me is, like, what do you want to do for your next 10 years?
Hmm. Good for
What
you.
what? And my goal is, I'm working on some books. I want to get out. I'm a very much a systems thinker, as you
Yes,
can
you are.
tell. And I've always been driven to sort of like explain everything. So I have an explanation of what exists. And, I like doing this. And that's why I took on the whole economics thing, because I'm devising an economic, or I have an economic theory a governance theory that's not based on money. Now, money can be part of that, but it's not based on that. It's not based on meism or rationality. And then it, like one of the things, from physics, this would be from physics. There's something called Brownian motion. And Brownian motion, if you put a bunch of particles in a vacuum, they somehow begin to coalesce. That's why we have galaxies. We don't have matter distributed evenly through the world. That's why we have cities. We don't have people spread evenly. Things have a tendency to congregate. So this idea of congregation is sort of a principle that is basis of economics. Money will congregate. If you have money, there will be people who make more and more money and congregate it. And then there's also the opposite, dissolution or distribution. So the key is, how do you balance distribution and aggregation? That would be one example of beginning to look at economics from a real scientific perspective.
Very interesting. Universal basic income?
You
like UBI, universal basic income?
I think that would be a real good idea. I think, I think we need to find a way to distribute, when you look at when people make a lot of money, it's based on all the work that everyone else has done, really. Right. And I'm not saying people shouldn't make more money than other people, but there needs to be, some equality, we don't need trillionaires. Okay. Nobody's that smart. Nobody's that good. Okay.
Steve, what motivates you, Steven? Right now, it's age 71. What's your motivation?
My motivation is to explore the universe, explore existence, and to get my ideas out so they can be helpful to others, and to get into the aesthetics. I'm very much into the aesthetics of writing. So when you read this book about my disappearance, you'll see there's a lot of, at times it gets very literary and aesthetic. At other times it's just kind of a narrative. There is poetry. There's kind of strange documents I wrote way back when. I'm like, what? You fucking wrote that stuff? I mean, it's a very odd kind of compilation of things. So yeah, aesthetics are very important to me. What we have in our environment influences us tremendously. I mean, look at our schools. They look like factories. Do you think that has an influence on our kids? Of course it does. Why don't we create beauty around us? Beauty and science can go together.
Yeah, certainly.
There's no reason we can't have that. There's that famous, I don't know, you remember the Martian Chronicles?
Of course.
By J.A.G. Remember the Martians, they have this sense of art and science kind of being the same, which we don't. And I think more beauty, who you have around you has a tremendous influence on you. If you hang out with people who, whatever, they pull you in their directions. It's like an alcoholic. If you're an alcoholic and you go to a bar, what's going to happen? The drinks are going to pull you to drinking. And so our world around us has a tremendous influence on us. We like to think we're in control all the time. No, it's the world around us that pulls us in many different directions. You've set up things around you. You have a radio show. You have people you work with. You have all these things, and they pull you along. Yeah. They pull you along. Now, maybe your idea to begin with, but you created the structure that pulls you along.
Interesting. It's got
in momentum. A good way.
Yeah. So exploring universal existence, to me, that I hear just eternal curious. You're curious and have to keep learning. So based on that motivation, Steven, how do you measure success?
I measure, I think success is getting things out in some way that can be helpful to people. It could be a product. It could be an idea. I'm very focused on the word praxis. Praxis is an ancient Greek word for taking ideas and thoughts and bringing them into action, but not just the word praxis in the Greek word means connecting on many different levels. So what you do has a personal effect in terms of authenticity, has an intersubjective or social effect in terms of politics, in terms of economics, has a scientific effect. It has some kind of transcendental effect, or I call transfigurative action, the need for awe, the need for connecting with the incomprehensible. So when somebody's involved in praxis, they're uniting all these four worlds, all these four ways. And this is what leads to good things. When one of the worlds dominates, like when, for example, the social world dominates, you might have something like communism or dictatorship. When you have the personal world dominate, you have this egocentrism, like, Elon Musk, I'm the universe, and fuck everyone else, right? You have this egocentrism, or you have when you can have authoritarian action when success and control in science gets to the extreme. So actually, that's one of the things I'm writing about in my book called The Sane Society.
Want to show your love for discipline, inspiration, and the Joey Pinz podcast? Now's your chance. Introducing the brand new Joey Pinz merch store, where style meets discipline. Choose from premium apparel, cozy hoodies, stylish hats, durable bags, and your new favorite coffee mug, all featuring the iconic Joey Pinz logo. Perfect for podcast fans, discipline enthusiasts, or as unique gifts for friends and family. Every purchase supports the Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations podcast, helping us continue to inspire greatness and promote positive change. Visit joeypinz.com/store today and wear your discipline proudly. Joey Pinz merch. Wear it, share it, and live it. See, with all these different areas that you want to focus on and what we kind of just talked about today, how do you know which one to work on at any particular moment?
Well, there's a progression. The getting the Disappearance book was important.
Yeah.
That's kind of the origin story. And now I have the next book is called The Multiverse Guides Humanity. It kind of looks at how the multiverse can be applied to helping us as human beings. Well, one of the things in there you'll find real interesting is what I argue is that certainty is the cognitive root of evil. That if you look at, the multiverse is uncertainty. Everything's changing, impermanence. If you look at people who are evil or bad, they always have a certain righteousness and certainty to them.
Amazing.
It's always there. And it's that certainty that leads to very bad things happening throughout history.
You're a fascinating man. Just eternal fascinating. I'm glad you wrote the book. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Probably your website, right? It's really good the way you update it. You got a timeline in there. You got everything in there. It's good.
Yeah, they can my website. I'm pretty easy to track down. My email. I'm not that hard. I'm not that hard to track down.
Steven Kubacki, KUBACKI.com. We'll make sure to put it up. You're also on X, but you don't post that much, but the website really is a good place to start.
Yeah.
Steven, I thank you so much for your time. Next time up
you.
there in the greater Northwest, maybe we'll get a cup of tea and
if you're up here, I'd love to meet you and hang out and just talk about stuff. A lot of stuff to talk about.
Absolutely.
You're an interesting
Steven,
man.
Thank you so much. You be well.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypinz.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.